I always start with this graph, and part of it is, out in San Francisco, Climate Week was last week. Tons of people to getting together. When I'm out in those conversations, I'm always just checking with where are people at on how we stabilize the climate in terms of carbon dioxide removal, in terms of other pieces of the equation. And the reason I always go back to this graph is this is what it's all about. The red line is decarbonization only. You can see that we don't get to 1.5 degrees or even 2 degrees of warming with decarbonization only. And so the gap is the opportunity for carbon dioxide removal to stabilize the climate. So today you're here for what's hot in carbon dioxide removal. And the point of talking about what's hot, especially at a time like this, is that, look, sometimes you're firing on all cylinders and you can just say, hey, look, let's find, what's something that could go a little bit faster or what's something that could work a little bit better. But at times, times like this with investors pulling back in carbon dioxide removal, a big buyer announcing a pause, government funding cuts, all that, what it really comes down to in this landscape is finding out the things that are working and then doing more of those or doing more of that. And so that's what today is all about. So if you're on the startup side, it's about finding out, gosh, like who's closing rounds, who's raising money, who's finding customers, and how. If you're on the corporate sustainability side, you're figuring out, okay, what's working there and what can I put into my program? If you're on the investment side, what are other investments that are coming together? So with that, let's get into what's hot in carbon dioxide removal. I'm going to share about 10 minutes of updates, and then we're going to split up into small groups for some conversations. So get your mics and cameras ready for that. And with that, let's dive in. So I was reading the signups where everybody said, what do they want to hear about? And Microsoft was the top one. Some of you have probably heard about Microsoft a ton already, but if you haven't, Microsoft has unofficially paused its carbon dioxide removal purchases. This was covered well in the news, and Microsoft's CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, has said that their program isn't ended. So that's kind of what happened. Doesn't seem super hot. So why am I talking about it? Well, because it's something to acknowledge and then figure out, okay, what is actually working? And so three things I wanted to point out is that the pause does seem real, even though it's not official. It's unclear how long the pause is. And by unclear, I mean like Microsoft hasn't said there's a pause, hasn't said how long it is, and hasn't said why there's a pause. So those are things to keep in tune for as if you start to hear official updates from Microsoft or things that you hear from people that are working with partners. But besides that, so much of this is speculation, right? And so I can speculate on it, how long the pause is going to be, why they're paused. But just, again, stay dialed into, what you actually hear, whether it's from Microsoft or sort of unofficially. A lot of people had said this is, pretty predictable. It was a big customer with a big bucket, and they were working on filling up that bucket. And hey, maybe the bucket kind of got filled up. Again, speculation because we don't actually know what's happened there. We had a meeting with all of our AirMiners Launchpad teams about this a couple days after the announcement came out. So if you're on the startup side and you weren't in that meeting, you can shoot me an email. But besides that, moving on to, well, what's next? Growing voluntary demand, and in the short term and in the long term, growing compliance markets. You've heard this forever, right? What happened didn't really change the core pieces of what's needed for carbon dioxide removal to succeed. So, maybe you were in a negotiation with Microsoft. Well, then your job is to figure out who your customer is instead. Maybe your investors are all emailing you and saying, well, what's going on with Microsoft or things like that. Your job is to work with those investors and figure out what's next instead. If you're, for example, working on your net zero plan, if you're on the corporate sustainability side, well, then really figuring out how to fine tune that and come up with, the message that works for your team. One example I wanted to point out here of something that's working is this is Google purchasing carbon dioxide removal credits from a company called AMP. So AMP has built a waste processing technology facility system, and they noticed, hey, we have all this organic waste. We could be turning that into biochar. And Google signed up and said, hey, we want to do that, right? So you have an existing business that's running, that's working, and they're saying, hey, we have this waste stream as part of our business. Can we turn that into carbon dioxide removal? Think about that from the buyer side, right? It's, hey, look, here's this up and coming business, somewhat stable, has a whole nother other revenue streams coming in, and we can also partner with them on carbon dioxide removal. So that's a case of what's working is things like that. So if you can go out and find partners that either have existing waste streams, or you can create your own business that has a waste stream. Um, Alongside other parts of the business. And again, nothing new here in that sense, but just highlighting that that is more valuable than ever. If you're on the corporate sustainability side, we also have our AirMiners Buyers Club and our Buyers Academy. Those are part of creating that next wave of demand for carbon dioxide removal. Who's going to be the next buyer? Who's going to be, if not the next Microsoft scale buyer, who are going to be the smaller buyers that participate in carbon dioxide? Again, all of this comes down to how do we close that gap between the red decarbonization line and 2 degrees of warming or 1.5 degrees of warming. If you've got an amazing business that just happens to remove billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, great. If you've got a business that's sole purpose is to suck carbon from the sky, great. As long as you can remove billions of tons of carbon dioxide. Ultimately, all of these things need to add up to be able to close that gap. Next up, here's something else that's hot is doubling down on advocacy from Gianna Amador at Carbon Removal Alliance. So their group worked on getting the DOE to unlock all that direct air capture hub funding. So the funding had been frozen or just sort of in limbo, and this unlocked funding for 10 of the 21 projects that were approved. I saw Vikram from Heirloom also highlighted three things that he said really worked with the administration. And when I think about what worked with the Trump administration, these are things that you might consider for your own pitch, whether you're talking to uh, potential customers, talking to potential investors. If you're on the corporate sustainability side, how do you talk about this with your CFO? One is the industry can eventually sustain itself without subsidies. Two is it aligns with energy security goals. And three is something that the local community and politicians really liked. So again, finding what's working. We can talk all day about all the things that don't seem to be going super smoothly, and the companies that go on and the organizations that go on to win here are going to be the ones that figure out, oh hey, wait, this thing is working. Can we just 1000x that? And that becomes your whole focus. The next thing that's working is mineralization science. So the Carbon Drawdown Initiative, if you all are familiar with that, they've been around this is Dirk Pessler, started it years ago, 3 years ago, and now he's hosting a symposium on the 3 years that they spent studying the science of rock weathering. They built the largest greenhouse experiment in the world for rock weathering, and they're presenting the results alongside 50 researchers who have taken soil samples from all around the world, and then they've brought them to this greenhouse laboratory and studied what happens. So that's coming up in June. I'm going to paste all the links here in the chat. This is just going to be a big blob of all the links I'm going to cover today. And that's the first one. So coming up in June and highlighting what's working, which is what's working is studying the scientific results of up and coming methods of carbon dioxide removal. That's working. And you might say, hey, well, we need to get to scale. Yes, and seeing what actually is making progress right now. The other example here is phytoplankton carbon solutions. So doing research on new scientific possibilities. You've probably heard of rock weathering before you came here today. Phytoplankton carbon solutions is a topic that's been on the radar for years in carbon dioxide removal. You might have heard topics like putting iron in the ocean or working with phytoplankton to have them grow faster. Ocean Visions in February published this research plan for assessing whether phytoplankton can be a mechanism for removing large amounts of carbon dioxide from the sky. And then last week, the Environmental Defense Fund, the EDF, launched its own initiative to evaluate whether phytoplankton can help remove carbon from the atmosphere. So what's hot is knowing what the options are. So if you have been working on a solution that's been on the edge with people have some scientific questions about, or something that just is really in the realm of, gosh, nobody's ever thought about this, consider that the next move can be the next hotspot can be partnering up with other groups, other funders, allies to answer those scientific questions. It doesn't mean you're not working on the scaling side of things or how to do that, but it means that if you can look at the scientific side of it, you're going to be able to find more partners, more research, more funding to prove those things out. Oscar is hot, simplifying contracts for the buyers and sellers of carbon dioxide removal credits to connect. There's a quote from Robert Hoagland at Milky Wire. He said they built their offtake templates off of it. And you know that Milky Wire is one of the largest, most active buyers in carbon dioxide removal, especially at the very earliest stages of a company. We had the Oscar group come to AirMiners and chat about a month ago, so you can find that recording on the YouTube channel. And if you happen to be in Zurich for Climate Week Zurich, they're hosting an event. So that initiative is all about it's all all volunteer led, and they're working on how to simplify these transactions, giving people a place to start with a template. So that's working, reducing friction in purchases. Some else that's hot is the world's largest or the largest ever IPO of a nuclear power company happened last week, and we're looking next week at how to connect nuclear energy and nuclear power to carbon dioxide removal. So this is a topic you might have heard about in terms of, energy sources for AI data centers. All the major hyperscaler companies are all investing in nuclear power. Where's the overlap with carbon dioxide removal? You might think of direct air capture as one particular application of having large sources of energy. So if that's up your alley, come join us on Tuesday and learn more about that. Last thing that's hot, Earth. I asked on the memes chat about this. I said, what's hot in carbon dioxide removal? And Austin said, Earth. So if this is this, you might say, oh gosh, I've been hearing about this for years. The one thing I want to point to you is in this last year, there have been a number of articles. Most recently, this article that just came out in February titled Global Warming Has Accelerated Significantly. So if you haven't read this, if you've just read the headlines, I highly recommend you read this set of papers. There's one by James Hansen that covers zero point 0.4 degrees of warming in the last 2 years. And there's this paper from 2 months ago highlighting that global warming has accelerated significantly, a statistically significant acceleration of global warming since about year 2015. So we're in a different world than we were in 2015. So if you haven't gone and really updated your thinking on climate, now is a really good time, and it's going to change how you think and the actions that you see that you can take on the climate. So with that is my updates on what's hot in carbon dioxide removal. Now, the whole point here is to find out, what's hot, what's working, what are you excited about? So now we're going to move to the group sessions, and the question is, what are you excited about from the last 3 months? So when you think about the last time we were here in January, what's something that you're actually excited about? Now you might say, I'm not, there's lots of things that you could be not excited about, but what this is about is what's one thing you're actually excited about? Maybe it's in carbon dioxide removal, maybe it's in your business, maybe it's in just the broader climate world. Look for something what has actually caught your interest. It might be silly, but it might be something serious, it might be something weird, something that surprised you, all those things that can fit in what's exciting that you found in the last 3 months. So I'm going to set up these breakout rooms. I'm going to have groups of 3 or 4 people. Everybody gets a minute to share your thing. Start out in terms of introducing yourself. Just name where you're calling in from, what part of the world you're calling in from, and what you're excited about over the next 3 months. So I'm going to open up those breakout rooms, and you can just click accept and go into that. And I'll send out a message of when to switch. So when we pass a 1 minute. So there we go. Rooms are open. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We got a couple minutes left, so we're going to dive right into what are you excited about most that you found in the last 3 months? And also, I was saying phytoplankton this morning, and thanks to the correction on phytoplankton. I know what I was thinking. All right, so first we've got photoplankton. What are those? Maybe that's a new species. Okay, David, You're up next.
Well,
What are you
good that you
excited about
mentioned
from the
that.
last 3 months?
Phytoplankton, I almost did it. They do photosynthesis. And I'm encouraged about so-called marine carbon dioxide removal because it's been getting more respect in the last 3 to 6 months. Uh, you used to see a lot of speculation about harmful effects, and now people are saying, this looks like the most highest potential to be the most economically practical way to go. The energy costs are nil, just for sailing some ships around, and I'm encouraged. And so
All
far,
right.
what's going on with the carbon markets, it's uh, shall we call it an adjustment?
Yeah, there you go. Good time to work on all our photo and phyto friends. And we've seen that in carbon dioxide removal, right? Before. People just swear up and down that there's a method that, doesn't make any sense, won't work, da da da. And then, hey, you study it and it turns out, well, some they don't work, but some they do. And everybody says, oh yeah, I mean, gosh, even rock weathering back in 2019 was like, you're gonna do what with rocks? And hey, now it's a main part of carbon dioxide removal. All right, next we've got Marshall. Marshall, what are you excited about from the last 3 months? And then we got
Uh,
Phil up after that.
yeah, thank you very much. I'll make it real quick. We just closed our 30th joint venture around the world, and we're pursuing this through a European Union climate bond under the waste management taxonomy. So each joint venture provides something to the table, brings something to the table. Most of them are brownfields as defined in the EU, not the EPA. And those brownfields allow us to convert organic waste, also inorganic, but predominantly organic waste, into thermal energy. The syngas we convert into electricity at large scale, and also large scale amounts of biochar. We process 120 metric tons a day per system, per unit of biomass, and turns it into a minimum of 30 metric tons of biochar per day. So we're looking for joint venture partners. Anybody out there wants to hook up with me on LinkedIn or get to me through Tito. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. That's Marshall. Uh, what's your last name? Marshall Memrell.
Mermel.
Mermel on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Hell yeah, that sounds really cool. Phil, what are you excited about from the last 3 months?
Okay, so we have pivoted from wave-driven upwelling for marine carbon dioxide removal to salinity gradient upwelling. This is the Stommel perpetual salt fountain, Henry Stommel, Woods Hole scientist. If you take a tube and sink it in the ocean and move the water from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top, you'll get a perpetual flow because you have the heat and salinity gradient working to move the water bottom to top. And so our new pivot is to salinity gradient upwelling. There are two papers relevant on this. One by Malte Jurkot from formerly at Geomar Kiel. Now he's in Norway. Um, and upwelling, in his 2025 paper, he says most of the benefit is in the cooling of the upper ocean. Cold water holds more CO2 than warm water. That's an abiotic effect. That's about 80% of the upwelling benefit. 20% is phytoplankton, the biological carbon pump that you are misquoted as phytoplankton. But I want to point out Malte Jurkot's very excellent paper. Andreas Aschli's head of the German Marine modeling group at Geomar is also a co-author, so it's a top-level paper. The second one is from Jost Kemper, also from Germany, on the Stommel upwelling. And he is able to model what the upwelling flow velocity is all around the world. And he finds anywhere from zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3 meters per second in certain regions, particularly the Central Pacific and others. And so Stommel upwelling, that's the direction we're going. Looks like I'm
Excellent.
running out of time. So, okay.
Glad to hear it. Thanks, Phil. Thanks. I'm glad you're working on that. All right, folks, that is what's hot in carbon dioxide removal. If you got something else you want to share out, you can always email me, tito@airminers.com. And pasted all those links again into the chat. So I'll see you all. If you want to come to the nuclear event on Tuesday, I look forward to seeing you all there.
Thank you. Thanks, Tito. Let's get to work.
Good
Thank
seeing you.
you. Take care.
See you, Craig.
Bye.
Bye, David.